In 1971, an American Airlines plane had taken off, and only a few minutes had passed when a passenger sitting in the very last row called a flight attendant over and handed her a note with a smile. The note contained only a few words, but those words created a nationwide shock across America. Who was this passenger, and why has the FBI still been unable to find him, alive or dead? But that's not even the strangest part. For more than 50 years, one of America's most powerful law enforcement agencies has been unable to extract even a single piece of reliable information about this mysterious passenger. Welcome back to Sahil Deewan Files. Let's begin this fascinating case. The story began on November 24th, 1971, at Portland International Airport. A man who appeared to be a businessman bought a ticket from Portland to Seattle and walked straight toward the aircraft. Back then, airport security in the United States was almost non-existent. Passengers' luggage wasn't routinely checked, and their identities weren't thoroughly verified. The aircraft was a Boeing 727 operated by Northwest Orient Airlines. It was supposed to take only 45 minutes to fly from Portland to Seattle. Wearing sunglasses and carrying a briefcase, the passenger boarded the plane and took his preferred seat, the very last row. He ordered himself a drink and lit a cigarette. At the time, everything still seemed completely normal because smoking was allowed on airplanes in the 1970s. At exactly 2:58 p.m., the plane took off. Shortly after takeoff, the man turned around and handed an envelope to the flight attendant sitting nearby. He did it with a smile. The flight attendant's name was Florence Schaffner. When she opened the envelope and read the note, it was as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The note said, "Miss, I have a bomb. I would like you to sit beside me." Florence Schaffner moved to the seat next to him. The man then opened his briefcase. Inside was what appeared to be a collection of dynamite sticks, wires, and a detonator. In short, the aircraft had been hijacked. And DB, Cooper, had 3 demands. He wanted $200,000 in cash before 5 p.m. He wanted 4 parachutes, and he wanted a refueling truck ready when the plane landed. At the end of his demands, Cooper indirectly made it clear to Florence Schaffner that if anything went wrong, he would detonate the bomb. Besides Cooper, there were 35 passengers on the aircraft. None of them had any idea what was happening at the back of the plane. Florence Schaffner took Cooper's demands to the cockpit and told the captain everything. Another flight attendant, Tina Mucklow, then came over with an intercom and sat near Cooper. Her job was to relay messages between the pilot and the hijacker. Remember, this was one of the first aircraft hijackings in American history carried out for ransom. Because of that, local authorities and the FBI decided to comply with the hijacker's demands. The authorities assumed that Cooper wouldn't be able to get very far once he left the aircraft. The flight was supposed to land in Seattle after only 45 minutes. Instead, it circled around the airport for roughly another hour and a half. The 35 passengers, who were completely unaware of what was really happening, were told that technical problems were causing difficulties with the landing. Meanwhile, $200,000 in cash was collected from Seattle National Bank. The money consisted of 10,000 $20 bills. The serial numbers of all the bills were recorded. 2 pairs of parachutes were also obtained from a nearby skydiving club. At 5:45 p.m., the aircraft finally landed. Just as promised, Cooper was given a bag containing the cash and 4 parachutes. The aircraft was also refueled. After receiving everything he had demanded, Cooper allowed the 35 passengers and 2 flight attendants to leave the plane. The pilots and 1 flight attendant were ordered to remain on board. By this point, it was already nighttime. The aircraft took off again. Through Tina Mucklow, Cooper gave the pilots a new set of instructions. He wanted the landing gear and flaps configured in a specific way. He wanted the aircraft flying at 10,000 feet. He wanted the speed kept at around 200 knots. And he wanted the aircraft to fly directly toward Mexico City. The pilot agreed to Cooper's other demands. but flying directly to Mexico City wasn't possible because of the aircraft's fuel limitations. So the pilot offered Cooper two options for refueling. He chose Reno, Nevada. Meanwhile, local and federal authorities were also working behind the scenes. Fighter jets were sent to follow the aircraft. But they couldn't maintain such a slow speed alongside the Boeing 727. So instead, they began circling around the aircraft. In the darkness of the night, the plane continued toward Reno. Then, Cooper told Tina Mucklow to return to the cockpit. Inside the cockpit were two pilots and one flight attendant. As Tina turned around to close the cockpit door, she saw Cooper for the final time. He was fastening something around his waist. Then he opened the aircraft's rear staircase. And DB. Cooper jumped out into the darkness. What happened next has been debated for more than 50 years. 3 hours later, when the aircraft landed in Reno, authorities thoroughly searched the entire plane. But there was no Cooper, and there was no body. After that night, DB, Cooper simply disappeared. No one could determine where he had gone. Not alive, not dead. The FBI opened one of the most mysterious cases in American history. No one had actually seen Cooper jump from the aircraft, but because the rear staircase had been left open, investigators knew that he had most likely jumped somewhere between Seattle and Reno. The FBI immediately began searching the aircraft for evidence. Unfortunately, they found very little. There was Cooper's tie, some cigarette butts, and one of the parachutes he had left behind. There wasn't even a proper photograph of him. Investigators interviewed the passengers and flight attendants who had seen him. Based on their descriptions, they created a composite sketch of the hijacker. But before the FBI could search the area between Seattle and Reno, they needed to determine exactly where Cooper had jumped. That wasn't as difficult as it might sound. The aircraft had been flying on autopilot. Its flight path was already known. Its speed and altitude were also known, and the flight recorder provided investigators with additional information. According to the recorded data, the rear staircase was opened at approximately 8:10 p.m. Using all of this information, investigators estimated Cooper's possible drop zone. They established a search area covering roughly 45 square kilometers. The area was surrounded by dense forests and mountainous terrain. Search teams and ground crews searched the entire area. They went through the forests, they searched the mountains, they checked the surrounding terrain. But they found no sign of D. B, Cooper, they didn't find his briefcase. And they didn't find the missing money. The area was extremely cold. Because of the harsh conditions, investigators initially believed that Cooper had probably died during the jump. But what happened next was something the FBI never expected. For the first time in American history, the FBI launched a public appeal specifically for information about the case. Cooper's composite sketch was published in newspapers. The serial numbers of the $200,000 in ransom money were also made public. A reward was offered for any information that could lead investigators to Cooper. The FBI believed that if Cooper was still alive, sooner or later he would have to spend the stolen money. But incredibly, not a single one of those serial numbered bills ever turned up. Not one. The case seemed completely frozen. Then, nearly 9 years later, in 1980, something extraordinary happened. In Washington State, along the Columbia River, there was a beach known as Tina Bar. A young boy was playing there with his parents when he discovered 3 bundles of cash buried near the riverbank. The money totaled $5,800. The boy's parents took the cash to the FBI, and fortunately, the serial numbers matched bills from the ransom money taken by B. Cooper. After 9 years, the FBI finally had its first major physical clue. But instead of solving the case, the discovery made the mystery even more complicated. The money had been found approximately 27 kilometers away from Cooper's estimated drop zone. At first, investigators believed that the money might have fallen into the Lewis River and eventually been carried downstream to the Columbia River. But there was a major problem. The Columbia River flows in the opposite direction. That meant the money could not simply have traveled from Cooper's drop zone through the Lewis River and ended up at Tina Bar. For the FBI, the mystery was becoming even more confusing. And there was another strange detail. The area around Tina Bar had undergone excavation work in 1974. 3 years after the hijacking, additional sand had been placed along the beach. The recovered money was found buried within that sand. This raised another possibility. Could Cooper or someone working with him have deliberately buried the money there years after the hijacking? The FBI investigated people who resembled Cooper. They followed numerous leads, but none produced a definitive answer. Several theories even suggested that Cooper may have been a trained military paratrooper. One reason was the type of parachute he chose. The parachute he took with him was a military-style parachute. It was more difficult to operate than the parachute he left behind on the aircraft. In 1994, investigators still had only the $5,800 recovered from Tina Bar. The remaining $9,700 in ransom money never resurfaced. As physical evidence, the FBI had Cooper's composite sketch. They also had the airline ticket on which he had written his name, and they had his tie. The tie had a clip positioned on the left side, which led some investigators to believe that DB, Cooper, may have been left-handed. For more than 50 years, this case has continued to leave the FBI with unanswered questions. Even today, the FBI's website contains extensive information about the case. And the mystery of DB, Cooper remains one of the most famous unsolved cases in American history. Who was DB? Cooper. Did he survive the jump? Did he die somewhere in the wilderness? Did someone help him escape? Or did he simply disappear with the money and live the rest of his life under another identity? We still don't know. The case has become a legend, and the truth remains hidden. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and share it. And thank you so much for all your love and support in the comments. I'll see you in the next fascinating video.